Isaac Sarason is a skilled hacker formerly employed by British Telecom-Sprint. With his health failing, Isaac did the only thing he could think of. He ran. He found a haven in a working-class district of the city known as Little Russia. There Isaac took on a new name, Ishmael. Within hours of his arrival, he was embroiled in the affairs of a brutal member of the Lomidze organized crime family known as Leo. Convinced by a longtime friend, Frankie, to flee from his commitments to the Lomidze family, Isaac found himself hunted by the ruthless Leo. On a rooftop, far from witnesses, Leo murdered Frankie. Only through the use of his skills as a hacker was Isaac able to drive Leo off. Now wounded, alone, and far from help, Isaac depends on the kindness of strangers. What do you do when the only way to save those you love is through the use of proxies? Colbyjack.net is proud to present Firmware Proxy by Colbytrax. I stared at the table. The unappetizing yet delicious food sat before me. I played with my fork, pushed the food around listlessly. I finished the coffee and the tea. I leaned back. I was clean, my face shaved, my skin clean, fresh clothes from the fresher. All said I was ready. Yet I waited. I knew I had to start. But starting meant committing. And I never have had a good relationship with commitment. I turned on the Opempo null and checked the time as its familiar desktop graced the ancient high-definition television. It was 12:30. I had moved on to prepare glasses of tranquilizer water when it hit me. It was 12:30, 30 minutes past noon. How long had I overslept? There was too much to do before Rama and his volunteers took down the red square switch, and along with them my only connection to Nona. I had to call the grandparents, maternal or paternal. I don't think it mattered. I had to call child services and prove to them the reality of Nona's situation. I had to leak the video of Nona's assault to the city. And I only had 3 hours. Weeks of poking around networks, prying into Leo's business, watching strangers through my battered old television screen. And it all came down to this: 3 hours of manic pressure before the curtain came down on Leo's network. Not figuratively. No, his network was really coming down, and with it my access to Nona. I turned on the shunt monitoring suite, took a slug of tranquilizer water, and got to work. Last things first. That was how I started. I grabbed the footage of Nona's recent assault and cut it just before she stabbed Stranger 2. To keep my blood pressure under control, I skipped through the video, only checking single frames until I found it. The static images were easier to deal with. I patted in a few views of her face from earlier, so it was apparent she was being held captive, and added the words, "Girl held in nesting doll bordello," the address and room number. I made an account on Video Diary and uploaded it. 3 minutes later, I had an address to send to anyone who cared. I really hadn't thought this through. If I had, I wouldn't have had to waste time looking up the addresses of children's rights activists and clergy members with a bent toward protecting children at the last minute. I ended up with a round dozen addresses of 8 organizations within a half-hour's walk of the nesting doll. No one further out would be of much help, and the numbers on the clock approached 3 in leaps and bounds. It was almost 1:30 when I sent off my bulk email to the bleeding hearts of the city. I chose the rabble-rousing clergy and professional activists instead of the media for one very good reason. They each had a pet media personality. Sure, I could have drafted a letter for each and every media personality in the city in about half the time. But those people are so jaded and insulated by AI mail filters and human producers that the chance of my cry for help breaking through the pack of conspiracy theorists, special interest groups, and corporate press agents was close to zero. No, it would have to be the clergy and paid activists to the rescue. Especially when I sent them a letter with a subject line consisting of 6 words, "Minor held in brothel, video attached." I included the address of the nesting doll and a link to the video. It was up to them to get the attention of the media. I then looked up the number of the local precinct house child services officer. Her name was Atang Salal. A good strong Indonesian name. According to Murray, the beat cops were in the hands of Lomidze. But I thought I knew a way around the issue, even if Leo had bought off child services. The media heat from the professional botherers would make it hard for them to ignore the situation. But that wasn't the only trick I had up my sleeve. I knew the city police precincts used Centrax 78G3 phone systems for my work at BTS. The Centrax 78G3 had a debugging extension which allowed the phone company to upgrade and patch the switch remotely. It also had a day zero bug which allowed root access to the system if you knew the right password. My team at BTS had demonstrated to Centrax the flaw, and what it was possible to do with it. The bosses at Centrax had shaken their heads and promptly ignored us. It appeared they had a booming business selling security upgrades and service plans. Fixing that bug would have deprived them of a revenue stream, so they let it stand. In response, BTS ended its contract with Centrax and had the Wonder Boys and girls of my team design our own solution around an AY143 switch. Needless to say, I didn't point out the security holes in the AY143, a fact which made my life a lot easier down the road. I hadn't intended to infiltrate BTS. It was just that the suits on the 111th floor would have shared that info with the manufacturer, and they would have fixed the hole, probably. And then I couldn't run around the ZYT network with impunity until I found another way in. As it was, One Police Plaza wasn't real big on after-sales support, choosing instead to trust in the skills of their own cybercrimes division to plug any holes in their security. Being more interested in arresting kiddie porn rings and illegal network bridges, little things like the security of their own precinct phone system tended to be ignored. Not that I was complaining. Their laziness made my job easier. I called the precinct. The Centrax switch intercepted my call on schedule and asked for which extension I wanted to call. I entered the extension for the patching system and waited for the Opemapo null to notify me of the data connection. I entered the Centrax default password and waited as the system ran through its new connection data spew. Once the stream of data ceased rolling across my screen, I issued the commands to list the state of the child care officer's phone. The system was in direct-to-inbox, a standard setting for most police officers, I was sure. It wouldn't do to be interrupted on a case by a continuously ringing phone. The inbox just wouldn't do today. One interesting feature of the Centrax 78G3 was the ability to call up a verbose call log for any extension. Instead of just recording the number of the call log also contained the caller ID listing, length, and forward status of the caller. Normally seen as a useless feature, in this case it would save me a lot of time. When a Centrax 78G3 is set to inbox, it is possible for a receiver to still receive calls from individuals on a special list. That list was bound to contain the numbers of such inconsequential people as fellow officers from their team, the precinct captain, and their immediate department supervisors at the parish and prefecture level. The status of the number at time of call, inbox, or receiving, and whether the call went to the inbox or was answered are all part of the log. I glanced through the log, looking for a number my mark couldn't refuse to answer. I was rewarded almost immediately with a number identified as belonging to Prefecture Captain Zhejiang Natsu. As to why this was good, that came down to numbers. The city is divided into 20 prefectures. These prefectures are each home to around 13 million people. The prefecture captain would be directly responsible for close to 500,000 prefecture police. Everyone from the janitors to the beat patrols, secretaries to precinct guards, all would report to her office. An office which probably employed a precinct's worth of secretaries, political aspirants, and inspectors. To be honest, the number listed in Atang Salal's phone log for the prefecture captain was probably the main office line. There was no way that prefecture captain Zhejiang Natsu had any time for child services lieutenant Atang Salal, or would know her out of uniform. There were enough flunkies in Zhejiang Natsu's office for me to make one up without risk of discovery. Another thing which worked in my favor was the fact that both Zhejiang and Atang appeared to be Indonesian. I would bet anyone jewels to donuts that they were also Catholic. This surety is not based on an intimate knowledge of the Indonesian culture, but a simple fact of city life. The city has always depended on displaced minorities for its police and fire departments, a practice extending back to the ancient pre-city days when the boroughs were first formed. Back then, Irish Catholic immigrants flooded the boroughs looking for work. The only work they could find was the work no one really wanted, of which the police and fire departments were two of the most legitimate industries. Naturally, they slowly filled the roles until the ancient monuments to police and firemen killed in the line of duty became a list of names beginning with O and Mac. Centuries later, the same system continued to absorb the hardest working, most rule-orientated of the newest immigrant stream. About 50 years ago, Indonesian Catholics became the minority after the rise of the Indonesian Caliphate and the expulsion of all non-Sunnis. It might be a bit of useless trivia on a normal day, but today it was the key to my strategy. I had the Centrax system create a new extension and then mapped its caller ID to Prefecture Captain Zhejiang Natsir's office. I activated the RealAct voice filter and set it to generate generic office noises. It wouldn't do to have the background be too quiet, especially on a call from an office as large as the Prefecture Captain's. I dialed Atang's number and waited for her to answer. I didn't have to wait long, only 3 rings, before she picked up. "Lieutenant Soal, how can I help you?" Her voice was tinny with the sound of background noise filtering. She probably wasn't even in her office, probably out to lunch or maybe checking up on a local kitty diddler. "This is the Prefecture Captain's office," I started. I knew she knew who was calling. It was on her caller ID. But even after centuries of use, people still like to be reminded to whom they were speaking. "I am so sorry to bother you like this, but the Prefecture Captain was very insistent that this problem was handled as soon as possible. The sooner it is cleared up, the better for everyone involved," I said with the air of one continuing a conversation started much earlier. "Problem? I am not aware of any prefecture-level issues," Atang responded. There was a hint of confusion in her voice. "This is Lieutenant Atang Salal, Precinct Child Services Officer for the 12370 Precinct," I confirmed. "Yes, it is," she answered. The tinniness of the line subsided as she moved into a quieter environment. I thought I heard the thump of a car door. "Then you must be aware of the reports of a young female of rumored Indonesian Catholic descent being held against her will at the Bordello. Let me see. I had the name around here. Oh, here it is. Are you familiar with the nesting doll on Tbilisi?" "The nesting doll? I know the place. What is this about a minor?" She sounded like she was taking the bait. While a cop shouldn't care about the race or creed of the victim, the truth was, if you pushed the right button, you could get the effect you wanted. "The notes I have here from—" I trailed off for a moment, letting her mind fill in the details. Sometimes they give you the details you need to fill in the rest. "Says you were contacted at the end of last shift with all the details of the case, and that you said you would handle it discreetly." "I think your notes are crossed," Atang snapped. "This is the first time I've heard of this. The last time Amanda called me, which would be Wednesday, all she wanted was the intervention statistics for the last month. She never called me yesterday. You need to get your facts straight." "Oh my! Why would she have noted this, especially after the Cardinal paid the Prefecture Captain a visit? She was in the meeting—" I continued on, ignoring the questions of Lieutenant Salel. "The problem is, well, there's a video." "A video? Of what?" Atang asked. I began to think if I pushed her too far, she might actually call Amanda. I couldn't have that. "There was a video of the girl released today on Video Diary. It appears—" "No. Spit it out," Atang barked. "Either tell me what is in the video or send me the link. I don't have time to play your bureaucratic games." "Yes, ma'am," I whimpered back. I sent the link. "Got it," she snapped. I waited on the line for her to come back. I heard an inhalation of breath and several, "Oh my gods!" She came back after a brief pause. "The next time you have something like this, just send the link direct. Don't waste my time. You do anything like this again, and I'll have your badge." I made to protest, but she had already hung up. Firmware, Proxy, is the second book in the Firmware pentology. That's 5 books, if you must know. It begins moments after Firmware Hijacked ends. So if you haven't heard or read Firmware Hijacked, this would be a good time to head on over to Colbyjack.net and either download the podcast on the audio side, read the episodes on the visual side, or download the Colbyjack Sunday Reader issues 1 through 20 in your choice of either EPUB or Mobi. Firmware Hijacked and Proxy are both available in ebook versions from our store at shop.colbyjack.net, amazon.com, and Barnes & Noble. Just search for Colbytrax. That's Colbytrax. I'm the only one. A complete audiobook version of both Firmware Hijacked and Proxy is available for download through our shop as well. If you don't need any stuff, but would like to support our work, drop on by Colbyjack.net and hit the pretty little donate button conveniently located on the right-hand side of the blog roll. If you're on a smaller screen, the button will be found at the bottom of the page. Firmware Proxy is released under a Creative Commons, non-commercial, attribution, share-alike 3.0 license. Do what you want with it, just don't sell it and always tell people where it came from. If you received this from a friend and want more information about Colbyjack.net and our split personality website, just drop on over to Colbyjack.net and select either the audio or visual side. The audio side carries our podcast, while the visual side carries our writings. Whichever side catches your fancy is fine with us. We're of two minds about the whole thing anyway. If you want to get social with me, I do mostly Twitter. So if you do the tweets and want to follow me, I'm Colbytrax. Spelled the same as above, Colbytrax. We could sing that all night long. Thank you once again and have a wonderful week.